Peter Collins stared at the letter in his hands, reading it for the 5th time. The school district was cutting staff. After 27 years of teaching math at Oak Ridge High School, he was being let go. Budget cuts, they said. Nothing personal. Just business. He sat alone in the teacher's lounge. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. 3 weeks before summer break, and now this. At 52 years old, Peter would need to start over. "I'm sorry, Peter," said Principal Allen from the doorway. "I fought for you. I really did." Peter nodded but said nothing. What could he say? He folded the letter and put it in his pocket. Then he gathered his coffee mug and walked past Principal Allen without meeting his eyes. The drive home felt longer than usual. Peter lived in a small house on Maple Street. Nothing fancy, but it was his. He had bought it 15 years ago after his divorce. It wasn't much, but it was home. That night, Peter didn't sleep. He sat at his kitchen table with a calculator and bills spread out before him. The numbers didn't add up. His savings wouldn't last long. The back surgery he had last year had eaten through most of his emergency fund. His health insurance would end next month. One step at a time, he told himself. Just take it one step at a time. The next morning, Peter called old contacts and sent out job applications. But the responses were always the same. "We're looking for someone younger. We need someone with more current skills. Have you thought about retirement?" Weeks passed, then months. Peter cut back on everything he could. He stopped eating out. He canceled his cable TV. He turned off the air conditioning despite the Kentucky summer heat. Still, it wasn't enough. The first missed mortgage payment came in August, the second in September. By October, the bank sent a foreclosure notice. Peter sat on his front porch and read it, his hands shaking. His neighbor Bill walked over with his dog. "Everything okay, Pete?" Bill asked. "Just fine," Peter lied, tucking the letter away. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" That night, Peter called his daughter in California. "Dad, you know I'd help if I could," she said. "But with the twins and Jack's medical bills, we're barely staying afloat ourselves." "I know, honey. I wasn't calling for money," Peter said, though that wasn't entirely true. "Just wanted to hear your voice." November came with its chill winds. The bank took the house. Peter sold what he could: his TV, his wife's old piano, even his father's watch. He moved into a cheap motel on the edge of town, watching his remaining money disappear day by day. In December, Peter's car was repossessed. Without transportation, he lost his part-time job stocking shelves at the local grocery store. The motel manager knocked on his door one Tuesday morning. "I'm sorry, Mr. Collins. If you can't pay for another week, you'll need to leave by tomorrow." Peter nodded. He had $7.32 to his name. That night it snowed. Peter walked from the motel with his remaining possessions in a backpack and 2 plastic bags. He had nowhere to go. Old friends had already offered what they could: a couch for a few nights, a meal here and there. But Peter's pride kept him from asking for more. They had their own troubles, their own families to care for. He walked for hours, the cold seeping through his thin jacket. Finally, he found himself at Johnson Creek, at the edge of the woods behind the town. There was an old fishing cabin there abandoned years ago. Peter had brought students here once on a field trip, teaching them to calculate water flow rates. The cabin was little more than a shell now. The roof had partially collapsed, and animals had made homes in the corners. But it was shelter. Peter cleared a space on the floor and unrolled his sleeping bag. He fell asleep to the sound of wind whistling through the broken windows. Morning brought clarity and shame. Peter had never imagined he would be homeless. He, who had once helped students prepare for college, who had owned a home and planned for retirement. Temporary, he told himself firmly. This is just temporary. Days passed. Peter walked into town to use the library computers, sending out more job applications. He washed in the creek and used the restrooms at the gas station. When he was hungry, he bought the cheapest food he could find. When his money ran out, he asked for work at the back doors of restaurants in exchange for meals. Most said no. Some gave him food anyway, out of pity. Peter hated the pity most of all. Winter grew harsher. The cabin provided little protection from the elements. Peter gathered discarded materials from construction sites and the town dump: plastic sheets, wooden pallets, old tarps. Day by day, he reinforced his shelter. He found an old barrel and made a fire pit, burning scrap wood for warmth. Sometimes people walked by on the path near the creek. Peter learned to stay quiet, to remain unseen. Once a former student passed close to his shelter. Peter ducked behind a tree, unwilling to be recognized. The boy, now a young man, walked on, never knowing his former math teacher was living like a wild animal just yards away. By spring, Peter's appearance had changed dramatically. His once neat hair hung long and tangled. His beard grew thick and unkempt. His clothes, worn daily and washed infrequently, hung loose on his thinning frame. One small blessing came unexpectedly. An old teaching colleague, Mary, agreed to let Peter use her address for mail. This allowed him to continue receiving his small Social Security checks. Not enough to rent an apartment, but enough to keep him from starving. "You could stay with us for a while," Mary offered when he came to collect his mail. "Just until you get back on your feet." "I'm fine, Mary," Peter said, not meeting her eyes. "Really? I've got a place lined up soon." The lie came easily now. Peter had grown used to protecting what remained of his dignity. As spring turned to summer, Peter's shelter improved. He built a small platform to keep his sleeping bag off the ground. He created storage areas for the few possessions he had left and the tools he had found or made. He dug a fire pit with stones around it to cook the fish he caught from the creek. People in town began to talk about the hermit in the woods. Few connected this mysterious figure with Peter Collins, the former math teacher. Occasionally, teens would venture into the woods on a dare, trying to spot the wild man. Peter became skilled at disappearing when he heard voices approach. The police came twice that first year, responding to reports of a trespasser. Both times, Peter saw them coming and hid deeper in the woods until they left. After each visit, he would move his camp, rebuilding his shelter in a new location. Slowly, Peter's old life receded like a distant shore. Days blurred together. He kept a journal at first, marking the date each morning. Eventually, he stopped. What was the point of counting days when each was the same as the last? In his isolation, Peter began talking to himself. At first, it was just to hear a human voice. Later, he held entire conversations, teaching imaginary students the mathematics he once loved. He filled notebooks with equations and theories, convinced he was making important discoveries that would someday restore his place in the world. 1 year passed, then 18 months. Peter's world shrank to the woods, the creek, and occasional nighttime visits to town. He became a shadow, a ghost of his former self. Some days, he couldn't remember the feeling of a mattress beneath him or the simple pleasure of a hot shower. Yet somehow, he survived. Through winter storms and summer heat, Peter adapted. He learned which plants were safe to eat, how to set snares for rabbits, how to preserve food without refrigeration. His body grew lean and weathered, his senses sharp. By the time 2 full years had passed, Peter Collins barely resembled the man who had once stood before a classroom. But he was still there beneath the wild appearance and odd behaviors, still surviving, still waiting for something to change, and change was coming, though Peter didn't know it yet. Just beyond the ridge, where the old Collins property met the new development, fate was preparing to deal a new hand. Peter woke before sunrise, as he did every day now. The habit had formed naturally over his 2 years in the woods. Dawn brought birds, animals, and the best fishing. It also meant he could move around freely before hikers or teenagers might venture near his hidden home. He crawled from his shelter, joints stiff from the cool night. His shack had improved greatly since those first desperate days. Using materials collected from construction site dumpsters and items others had thrown away, Peter had built a structure that kept out rain and most of the wind. The walls were a patchwork of wooden pallets, plastic sheeting, and flattened metal signs. The roof was layered with tarps, carefully angled to direct rainwater into collection barrels. Inside, Peter had created a bed frame from branches and discarded lumber, raised off the ground to keep away insects and dampness. His few possessions were organized nearly around the small space. A pot for cooking, tools for repairs, notebooks filled with his writings, and clothing he had either kept from before or found discarded. Peter splashed creek water on his face from a plastic container. His reflection in the still water startled him sometimes. The face looking back was weathered, with a long gray beard and hair that hung past his shoulders. His cheeks were hollow, his eyes deeper set than before. Only occasionally did he recognize glimpses of the math teacher he had once been. "Good morning, world," Peter said aloud. Speaking had become important. Days would pass without human contact, and Peter feared losing his voice, losing that final connection to humanity. Breakfast was simple. The last of yesterday's fish, cold, wrapped in a wild grape leaf. Peter chewed slowly, making a mental list of the day's tasks. The east wall needed reinforcement before the summer storms. His water filtration system, plastic bottles filled with layers of sand, charcoal, and gravel, needed cleaning. And he was running low on matches. After eating, Peter checked his calendar. A series of marks scratched into a piece of wood. Today was the 15th, which meant Mary would have his Social Security check. The monthly journey into town was risky, but necessary. Peter changed into his town clothes, the cleanest items he owned, kept specially for these trips. He washed in the creek, scrubbing his hands and face with a small piece of soap he had been making last for weeks. He tied back his hair and tried to make his beard look less wild. The goal was to blend in, to look poor but not homeless, eccentric but not dangerous. The walk to town took nearly an hour. Peter stayed in the woods as long as possible, only taking to the roads when necessary. He kept his head down when cars passed. Mary's house was on Pine Street, a modest home with blue shutters and a garden of daffodils out front. Peter approached from the back, as always. Mary was waiting on her back porch with a cup of coffee and a sandwich. "You're getting too thin, Peter," she said by way of greeting. "Hello to you too, Mary," Peter replied, his voice scratchy from disuse. Mary handed him the envelope with his check along with a small bag of supplies, toothpaste, a new toothbrush, soap, and some bandages. These small kindnesses meant everything. The school district is hiring again, Mary said carefully. "Just a part-time position, but—" "Thank you for the check," Peter interrupted. He couldn't bear the hope in her voice, the suggestion that his old life was still within reach. Mary sighed. "At least stay for lunch, I made extra. Can't today, things to do." Peter tucked the envelope and supplies into his backpack. "Same time next month?" Mary nodded, the worry lines around her eyes deepening. "Peter, you can't live in those woods forever." Peter just waved and walked away. He knew Mary was right, but what choice did he have? His pride wouldn't let him accept charity, and his experience had taught him that the world had little use for a failed middle-aged teacher. At the bank, Peter cashed his check. The teller, a young woman who had once been his student, didn't recognize him. Peter was grateful for that small mercy. With money in his pocket, he headed to the discount store for supplies, matches, a new knife to replace the one he had broken, some fishing line and batteries for his flashlight. Food came next: rice, beans, canned tuna, and a jar of peanut butter. Items that would last, that provided energy. At the pharmacy, he bought pain relievers for his back and knees, which ached more with each passing season. The final stop was always the hardest. Peter stood outside the library, gathering his courage. Inside were computers, access to the world, reminders of his past life. Once a month, he allowed himself this connection. At the computer, Peter checked his email. There were few messages. An advertisement, a newsletter from the Math Teachers Association he once belonged to, and a short note from his daughter with photos of his grandchildren. Peter stared at their smiling faces, these children who didn't know their grandfather lived in a shack in the woods. He typed a brief reply, mentioning nothing of his circumstances. "Everything is fine here. The kids are growing so fast. Love, Dad." The lie tasted bitter. But what good would the truth do? Before leaving, Peter printed a few articles about new teaching methods in mathematics, reading material for the long evenings alone. The librarian, Mrs. Patel, gave him a curious look but said nothing. Perhaps she knew. Perhaps everyone knew and politely looked away. Walking back to the woods, Peter's backpack heavy with supplies, he felt the familiar mix of relief and dread. Relief to be heading back to his sanctuary, dread for the endless days ahead. A group of teenagers passed him on the road, laughing and pushing each other. One boy pointed at Peter and whispered something. The others laughed harder. Peter quickened his pace, eyes on the ground. He had taught children that age not long ago. Now he was just the strange old man they mocked as they passed. Back in the car, woods, Peter carefully stored his new supplies. He had gotten good at making things last, at finding uses for every item. Nothing was wasted in his small world. As evening approached, Peter built a small fire in his pit. The flames provided light to read by and warmth against the night chill. He opened one of his notebooks and began writing equations, a habit from his teaching days that now felt like meditation. Sometimes, in these quiet moments, Peter wondered how his life had unraveled so completely. From respected teacher to woods-dwelling hermit in just 2 years, the path seemed both gradual and sudden, a slow erosion followed by a rapid collapse. Sleep came earlier now that his days were governed by natural light. Peter lay on his makeshift bed, listening to the night sounds of the forest. Crickets, owls, the occasional rustle of animals moving through underbrush. These had become his companions, more familiar than human voices. Tomorrow would bring more of the same, gathering food, maintaining his shelter, surviving one more day. Peter had stopped planning for a future beyond the next season. Winter meant more layers of insulation for the shack. Spring meant repairing damage from winter storms. Summer meant abundant food but dangerous heat. Fall meant preparation for winter again. The cycle continued, separate from the world of jobs and homes and normal lives. Peter's dreams that night were of classrooms and chalkboards, of eager students and math problems neatly solved. He woke before dawn with tears on his face, quickly, wiped away though no one was there to see. The morning brought unexpected sounds. Voices, engines, the beeping of heavy machinery backing up. Peter froze in his morning routine, listening carefully. The noises came from beyond the ridge, perhaps half a mile away. Construction by the sound of it. Peter's heart raced. New construction meant people, meant attention to these woods that had been his sanctuary. It meant danger. Carefully, keeping to the densest parts of the forest, Peter made his way toward the sounds. He needed to know what was happening, needed to assess the threat. At the edge of a clearing, he stopped, hidden behind a large oak tree. Before him sprawled the beginnings of what would clearly be a massive construction project. Bulldozers cleared land. Men in hard hats consulted blueprints. Stakes with bright orange ribbons marked boundaries. As Peter watched, a black luxury SUV pulled up. The man who stepped out wore an expensive suit and carried himself with the confidence of someone in charge. Tall, silver-haired, with a commanding presence. He pointed in various directions, and the workers nodded respectfully. Peter's stomach tightened with dread. Whatever was being built here would bring more people, more attention. His hidden life was in danger. He would need to move deeper into the woods, start again with a new shelter, new hiding places. As Peter turned to go, a twig snapped under his foot. The sound seemed deafening in the morning air. The silver-haired man turned, looking directly toward Peter's hiding spot. For a moment, their eyes met across the distance. Then Peter slipped away into the shadows of the forest, his heart pounding. The encounter lasted only seconds, but Peter felt a chill of premonition. Something had changed. His carefully balanced existence was about to be disrupted. He didn't know yet that the man in the expensive suit was Samuel Porter, and that their paths were destined to cross again very soon. The construction continued for days. Peter watched from safe distances, hidden among trees and bushes. Each morning, workers arrived at 7. Each evening, they left at 6. The forest that had been quiet for so long now echoed with the sounds of machinery, shouting men, and trees falling. Peter moved his shelter deeper into the woods, away from the construction. It took him 3 days to rebuild. The new location was closer to the creek but farther from town. The walk to Mary's house would be longer now, but safety was more important than convenience. A week after first seeing the construction, Peter decided to learn more. He needed to know how much of the forest would be destroyed, how close the new buildings would come to his hidden home. Late one night, when the workers were gone, Peter crept to the construction site. The moonlight showed wooden stakes in the ground with orange ribbons. They formed a large square that stretched from the main road almost to the creek. Peter's heart sank. The construction would come very close to his new shelter location. He might need to move again soon. On a large board at the site, Peter found a sign: Future Home of Porter Estates, Luxury Homes by Porter Development. Below was a drawing of big houses with large yards, the kind of houses Peter could never afford, even when he had been a teacher. Peter was studying the sign when bright light suddenly flooded the area. He turned, momentarily blinded, and heard a car engine. Someone was making a late visit to the construction site. Peter ran into the darkness of the trees. He watched from his hiding spot as the black SUV he had seen before parked near the sign. The silver-haired man stepped out, followed by a younger man carrying a clipboard. "The eastern boundary needs to be adjusted, Greg," the silver-haired man said. "We're too close to the creek. Environmental regulations won't allow building within 50 yards. "Yes, Mr. Porter," the younger man replied. "I'll have the surveyors remark it tomorrow." So this was Porter, the man behind the development. Peter watched as the two men walked the site, talking about drainage, road access, and something called Phase 2. Their conversation confirmed Peter's fears. This development would eventually cover much more of the forest. His days of hiding here were numbered. The next morning, Peter began planning his next move. Perhaps he could go farther upstream, deeper into the forest. But how far would this development eventually reach? And how many other forests were being turned into housing developments? Where could a man hide in a world that kept building, expanding, taking over every wild space? Peter's thoughts were interrupted by voices, unusually close to his shelter. He froze, listening carefully. Two men were walking along the creek, not far away. "The water test results came back good," one voice said. "Porter will be happy about that." "Yeah, but we still need to check for any evidence of pollution upstream," the second voice replied. "You know how strict the regulations are. One contaminated sample and we could face delays." The voices grew louder. They were coming directly toward Peter's shelter. He quickly gathered his notebook and slipped into the dense bushes behind his shack. Through the leaves, he watched as two men in company, polo shirts, emerged from the trees. They carried equipment bags and water testing kits. The men stopped short when they saw Peter's shelter. "What the hell is this?" the taller man said, moving closer to examine the structure. "Looks like someone's been camping here," the other replied. "Pretty elaborate setup for a camper, though." The tall man pulled out his phone. "I better call Greg. Porter needs to know about this." Peter held his breath. His heart pounded so loudly he feared the men might hear it. They poked around his shelter, opening the plastic door flap, looking at his few possessions inside. "Whoever built this has been here a while," the tall man said. "Look at these notebooks. Pages and pages of math. Weird." He held up one of Peter's notebooks, flipping through the pages of equations and theories. Peter wanted to rush out and grab it to protect his private thoughts, but he remained hidden. 20 minutes later, the black SUV arrived. Greg, the man with the clipboard, stepped out, followed by Mr. Porter himself. They examined Peter's shelter with serious expressions. "Homeless, most likely," Greg said. "We'll need to have security remove this and make sure they don't come back." Porter nodded, but then picked up one of Peter's notebooks. Unlike Greg, he took time to read several pages. His expression changed from annoyed to curious. "These are advanced calculus theories," Porter said. Look at this work on differential equations. This isn't the work of an ordinary homeless person. Greg shrugged. Still, we can't have squatters on the property. I'll call the sheriff's office and have them handle it. Porter continued to flip through the notebook. Have them come tomorrow. I want to see who's living here. These equations, they remind me of work I studied in college. There's something familiar about this approach. The men left, taking one of Peter's notebooks with them. Peter remained hidden until he was sure they were gone. Then he emerged, shaking with fear and anger. They had invaded his space, touched his things, taken his work, and tomorrow the sheriff would come to force him out. Peter quickly packed his most important possessions, his remaining notebooks, the photo of his daughter and grandchildren, his few tools, and the small amount of food he had. He could build another shelter, find another hiding place, but he needed to take these essential items with him. As darkness fell, Peter prepared to leave, but then he stopped. The notebook Porter had taken contained 2 years of work, theories about teaching mathematics, ideas that had kept his mind sharp during his isolation. It was the one thing that connected him to his former life, to the teacher he had once been. He couldn't simply abandon it. Peter made a decision. He would watch the construction site in the morning. When Porter arrived, Peter would approach him and ask for his notebook back. After that, he would disappear into another part of the forest, another hiding place where no one would find him. He spent a restless night under the stars, his few possessions packed in his backpack. The shelter that had been his home now felt exposed, vulnerable. Every sound in the forest made him jump. Morning came with heavy dew and bird songs. Peter ate a small breakfast of berries and the last piece of bread from his town visit. Then he made his way to the edge of the construction site and waited, hidden behind a large oak tree. The workers arrived at 7 as usual. They began their day, unaware of the man watching from the forest edge. At 8:30, the black SUV pulled up. Porter stepped out, followed by Greg. They talked with the foreman for several minutes. Then another vehicle arrived, a sheriff's department SUV. 2 deputies stepped out and spoke with Porter and Greg. Peter's heart raced. This was it. They had come for him, come to drive him away from the only home he had left. Peter watched as Porter handed his notebook to one of the deputies. The officer flipped through it, then nodded. The group began walking toward the path that led to Peter's shelter. Soon they would find it empty and begin searching the surrounding forest. Peter had a choice to make. He could run now, while they were distracted. Or he could confront them, ask for his notebook, and face the consequences. Something, inside Peter, some small remnant of the man he had once been, made the decision for him. He stepped out from behind the tree and walked slowly toward the group. His long hair and beard, his worn clothes, and his thin frame made him look wild, almost dangerous. The deputies saw him first. Their hands moved to their weapons, though. They didn't draw them. "Stop right there," one called out. "Keep your hands where we can see them." Peter stopped. He raised his hands slowly. He saw Porter staring at him with surprise and curiosity. "That's my notebook," Peter said, his voice rough from disuse. "I'd like it back, please." The deputies moved toward Peter cautiously. "Sir, you've been trespassing on private property," one said. "We need to ask you some questions." Porter held up a hand, stopping the deputies. He stepped forward, still holding Peter's notebook. "Who are you?" Porter asked. "Did you write these equations?" Peter nodded. "My name is Peter Collins. I was a math teacher at Oak Ridge High School. And yes, those are my equations." Recognition flashed in Porter's eyes. Collins, the same Collins who published that paper on teaching calculus to high school students about 10 years ago? Peter blinked in surprise. "You've read my paper?" "I have a daughter who struggled with math," Porter explained. "Your methods helped her understand calculus when nothing else worked." For a moment, the two men simply looked at each other, the wealthy developer and the homeless former teacher. Then one of the deputies broke the silence. "Mr. Porter, do you want us to remove him from the property?" Porter looked at the deputy, then back at Peter. There was a moment of tension as everyone waited for his answer. The deputy took a step toward Peter, reaching for his arm. That's when Porter suddenly shouted the words that would change everything. "Let him go. Stop this right now." Everyone froze at Porter's sudden outburst. The deputy's hand stopped in midair, inches from Peter's arm. Greg looked at his boss with confusion. The construction workers in the distance turned to see what was happening. "Sir?" the deputy said, uncertain. "I said let him go," Porter repeated, his voice calmer but still firm. "This man isn't just some random trespasser." The deputy stepped back, looking between Porter and Peter with confusion. Porter handed Peter's notebook back to him, then turned to Greg. "Tell the crew to take an early lunch break," Porter said. "And you two," he nodded to the deputies. "Thank you for coming out, but I won't be pressing charges." "Are you sure, Mr. Porter?" the older deputy asked. "We can remove him from the property." "That won't be necessary," Porter replied. "This is a misunderstanding. Mr. Collins and I need to talk privately." The deputies looked at each other, then shrugged. "It's your property," the older one said. "Call us if you need anything else." As the deputies walked back to their vehicle and Greg headed toward the construction crew, Porter turned to Peter. "Let's sit down and talk," he said, gesturing to a fallen log nearby. "I think we have some things to discuss." Peter clutched his notebook tightly, unsure what to make of this unexpected turn. Was this a trick? Would Porter call the deputies back once they were alone? But he had few options. He followed Porter to the log and sat down, keeping a careful distance between them. "How long have you been living in these woods?" Porter asked directly. Peter hesitated, then decided truth was his best option. "Almost 2 years now." Porter nodded, studying Peter's weathered face and ragged appearance. "And before that, you said you taught at Oak Ridge High?" "For 27 years, Peter replied, "until budget cuts." He didn't elaborate. The story felt too painful, too personal to share with this stranger. But Porter seemed to understand what remained unsaid. The recession hit the schools hard. Many good teachers lost their jobs. They sat in silence for a moment. A breeze rustled the leaves overhead. In the distance, the construction workers were packing up for their lunch break. "Your notebook," Porter said finally. "Those equations and teaching methods. You've continued your work even out here?" Peter nodded. "It keeps my mind sharp. Gives me purpose." He opened the notebook, showing Porter the pages of carefully written formulas and teaching theories. "I've been developing a new approach to teaching algebraic concepts to students who struggle with traditional methods." Porter leaned closer, genuine interest in his eyes. "My daughter Lisa was one of those students. Your paper on visual approaches to calculus was the only thing that helped her understand. She's studying engineering now at MIT. For the first time in years, Peter felt a flicker of pride. His work had helped someone. It had mattered. "Mr. Collins," Porter said, "I have to ask, how did a published math teacher end up living in a shack? In the woods?" The question hung in the air between them. Peter looked down at his hands, dirt under his fingernails, skin rough from outdoor living. The whole story felt too big, too complex to explain, but he tried. "After I lost my job, I couldn't find another teaching position. Too old, they said. Then my savings ran out. Medical bills from back surgery. The bank took my house. The finance company took my car." Peter's voice grew quieter. "You lose one thing, then another, then another. Before you know it, you're sleeping under a bridge, wondering how your life fell apart so fast." Porter listened without interrupting. His face showed no judgment, only attention. "The woods seemed safer than the streets," Peter continued. "Quieter. I built the first shelter just to survive a rainstorm. Then I improved it, made it more permanent. Soon, it was home." "And your family?" Porter asked gently. "My daughter's in California. She has her own struggles. I didn't want to be a burden." Peter took a deep breath. "After a while, it was easier to disappear than to explain what had happened to me." Porter nodded slowly, seeming to process Peter's story. Then he stood up. "Come with me," he said. "I want to show you something." Warily, Peter followed Porter back to his SUV. Porter opened the passenger door. "Get in." Peter hesitated. "Where are we going?" "Not far," Porter assured him. "Just to the other side of the property. There's something you should see." Against his better judgment, Peter climbed into the luxury vehicle. The leather seat felt strange after so long sleeping on the ground. The air conditioning was a shock to his system. Porter drove along a dirt road that curved around the edge of the construction site. They passed more stakes with orange ribbons, marking out future roads and building sites. After about 5 minutes, Porter stopped at a clearing with a magnificent view of the valley below. "This is phase 2 of the development," Porter explained. "We're building 12 luxury homes in this section, each on 5 acres of land." Peter nodded, not understanding why Porter was showing him this. "The original plan included building on your section of the woods," Porter continued. "But that area is too close to the creek. Environmental regulations won't allow it." Peter felt a surge of hope. Did this mean his home was safe? "Mr. Collins," Porter said, turning in his seat to face Peter directly, "I'm not going to develop that section of the woods, but I can't have someone living in a makeshift shelter on my property either." Peter's hope faded. So he would be forced to leave after all. "Instead," Porter continued, "I have a proposal for you." Peter looked at him with surprise. "This development needs a caretaker," Porter said. "Someone to watch over the property, report any problems, keep an eye on things during construction and after the homes are built." "A caretaker?" Peter repeated, confused. "The position comes with housing," Porter continued. "There's an old cottage at the edge of the property. It needs work, but it's solid. Has electricity, running water, a bathroom, basic but livable." Peter stared at Porter, unable to believe what he was hearing. "You're offering me a job? And a place to live?" "I am," Porter confirmed. "The salary isn't much, but it would be steady income. The cottage would be part of your compensation." "Why?" Peter asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you do this for me?" Porter was quiet for a moment, looking out at the view. 20 years ago I was broke," he said finally. "My first business had failed. I was in debt. My wife was pregnant with Lisa. I was desperate." He turned back to Peter. "A stranger gave me a chance when no one else would. He invested in my second business idea. That business became Porter Development." Porter gestured at the construction site below them. "All of this exists because someone saw potential in me when all anyone else saw was failure." Peter absorbed this information slowly. "And you think I have potential?" "I think you're a brilliant math teacher who's had bad luck," Porter replied. "I think your work could still help students if you had the chance. And I think everyone deserves an opportunity to rebuild their life." Peter looked down at his notebook, then back at Porter. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Porter replied simply. "Say you'll take the job and the cottage. Say you'll let me help you get back on your feet." For the first time in 2 years, Peter felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. Not just for surviving another day, but for actually living again. For rejoining the world. "Can I see the cottage first?" Peter asked. Porter smiled. "Of course, it's just down the road." They drove to a small clearing where a stone cottage stood among the trees. It was old but charming, with a porch that wrapped around one side and windows that needed washing but weren't broken. Compared to Peter's shack, it looked like a palace. Inside was simple. One main room with a kitchenette, a small bedroom, and a basic bathroom. The furniture was old but functional. There was a desk by the window where Peter could work on his mathematics. "It needs cleaning," Porter said, "and some repairs, but it's yours if you want it." Peter walked slowly around the cottage, touching the solid walls, looking out the windows at the trees surrounding it. It was private but not isolated, safe but not hidden. "When could I start?" Peter asked, his voice thick with emotion. Porter smiled. "Right now if you want. The cottage is ready. We can go get your things from your shelter." Peter nodded, unable to speak. They drove back to his shack in silence. Peter gathered his few possessions, his notebooks, tools, and personal items. It all fit in one backpack and a small box. 2 years of his life packed up in minutes. As they drove back to the cottage, Peter watched his shack disappear through the rear window. That chapter of his life was ending. A new one was beginning, all because a stranger had seen him not as a problem to be removed, but as a person deserving of dignity and respect. "Thank you," Peter said quietly as they parked in front of the cottage again. "Not just for the job and the cottage, for seeing me, for saying those words." "What words?" Porter asked. Peter looked at him. "Let him go. Those were the first words. You said. Not remove him or arrest him, but let him go. Like I was a person, not a problem." Porter nodded, understanding. "Everyone deserves to be seen, Mr. Collins. Everyone deserves a second chance." Peter stepped out of the SUV, carrying his backpack and box toward his new home. For the first time in years, he walked with his head held high, like the teacher he once was, like the man he might become again. 6 months passed. The cottage became a home. Peter kept it clean and simple, but added small touches that made it his own. Curtains on the windows, books on the shelves, a comfortable chair for reading. The hot shower and real bed still felt like luxury after 2 years in the woods. Peter took his job as caretaker seriously. Each morning he walked the property, checking for problems. He reported trespassers, picked up trash, and watched for signs of erosion near the creek. The construction workers got used to seeing him and would wave as he passed. Porter visited once a week to check on progress. He always made time to talk with Peter, often staying for coffee on the cottage porch. Their conversations usually turned to mathematics. Porter was genuinely interested in Peter's teaching theories, and Peter enjoyed having someone to discuss his ideas with. "You should write this up," Porter said one day, looking through Peter's latest notebook. "These approaches could help a lot of students." Peter shook his head. "Who would publish the work of a man who lived in the woods for 2 years? My professional reputation is gone." Porter considered this. "What if you had institutional backing, a university connection?" 2 weeks later, Porter arrived with a visitor, Dr. Helen Garcia from the local community college. "Mr. Collins," she said, shaking Peter's hand firmly. "Sam has told me about your work on alternative teaching methods for mathematics. I'd like to hear more." They talked for hours. Dr. Garcia asked sharp questions and took notes. By the end of the conversation, she made an offer. "We need part-time instructors for our remedial math program," she said. "Students who struggled in high school but need math credits for their degrees. Would you be interested in teaching one class next semester? Try out some of your methods?" Peter stared at her, then at Porter, who was trying not to smile. "I don't have proper clothes," Peter said, the first objection that came to mind. "I haven't taught in years. My teaching license has expired." Dr. Garcia waved these concerns away. "The license can be reinstated. As for the rest, we can help with that. The question is, do you want to teach again?" Peter thought about his classroom at Oak Ridge High, the satisfaction of seeing a student finally understand a difficult concept. The purpose he had felt each day. "Yes," he said quietly. "I want to teach again." The next weeks were busy. Porter helped Peter get a proper haircut and new clothes. Dr. Garcia helped with the paperwork to reinstate his teaching credentials. Mary, when she heard the news, cried and hugged him tightly. "I knew you would find your way back," she said. Peter's first day back in a classroom was terrifying. His hand shook as he wrote his name on the whiteboard. "Mr. Collins, Math 101. The students filing in looked bored and resigned, expecting another dull math class. But Peter had spent 2 years refining his teaching methods. He started not with formulas or problems, but with stories, mathematics as a language, numbers as tools for understanding the world. By the end of that first class, every student was engaged, asking questions, participating. After class, a young woman approached his desk. "Mr. Collins, that thing you showed us about using shapes to understand equations? That actually made sense to me. Math never made sense before." Those words were worth more than any paycheck. As weeks passed, word spread about the unusual math teacher at the community college. Students who had failed math multiple times were suddenly passing. Dr. Garcia asked Peter to document his methods and share them with other instructors. Porter, hearing of Peter's success, had an idea. "You should write a book," he said during one of their coffee meetings. "A guide for teachers and students who struggle with traditional methods." Peter laughed. "A book? Who would publish it?" "I know people in publishing," Porter replied. "Let me make some calls." 3 months later, Peter sat at his desk in the cottage staring at a publishing contract. His book, Finding Math in the Real World, Alternative Approaches to Teaching Mathematics, would be published next spring. The advance wasn't large, but it was more money than Peter had seen in years. That evening, Peter called his daughter in California. They had been talking more frequently since Peter moved into the cottage, but he had never fully explained his 2 years in the woods. Now, with his life rebuilding, he felt ready to share the whole story. "Dad, why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice breaking. "I would have helped." "You had your own struggles," Peter said gently, "and I was ashamed. But I'm calling now, because I want you and the kids to visit. I have a home now, a job, I'm even writing a book." There was a pause on the line. "We'll come," she said finally. "The kids miss their grandpa." A year after Porter had found him in the woods, Peter's life was transformed. He taught 3 classes at the community college. His book was almost finished. His cottage was now fully renovated with a proper office for his writing and research. But the biggest change came unexpectedly. Porter arrived one afternoon with an official-looking envelope. "The Porter Foundation is establishing a scholarship program for disadvantaged students interested in mathematics," he explained. "We need a director to review applications and mentor recipients. The board unanimously voted to offer you the position." Peter opened the envelope. The salary made his eyes widen. "This is too much," he protested. "It's exactly right," Porter countered. "You'll keep teaching your classes. The foundation work would be additional. You have a unique perspective, Peter. You understand struggle in a way most academics never will." Peter thought about his journey, from respected teacher to homeless man to rebuilding his life. He had seen both sides of fortune. That understanding could help others who were struggling. "I'll do it," he said. "Thank you." Porter smiled. "Don't thank me. You earned this. I just opened a door. You walked through it." The following spring, Peter stood nervously in the college auditorium. His book had been published to positive reviews. Today was the launch event, combined with the announcement of the Porter Foundation's new mathematics scholarship program. The room was full. Teachers, students, local press. In the front row sat his daughter and grandchildren, visiting from California. Mary sat beside them, beaming with pride. And next to her was Porter, the man who had changed everything with 4 simple words. "Let him go." Dr. Garcia introduced Peter to the audience. 2 years ago, Professor Collins was living in a makeshift shelter in the woods. Today he is revolutionizing how we teach mathematics to struggling students. His story reminds us that brilliance can be found in unexpected places, and that second chances matter. As Peter approached the podium, he saw Porter stand and begin applauding. Others joined until the entire room was giving him a standing ovation. For a moment, Peter remembered the feeling of being invisible, of people looking through him as if he didn't exist. Now he was seen. His work mattered. His life had purpose again. "Thank you," Peter began when the applause finally quieted. "My journey from the classroom to the woods and back again taught me something important. We all need connections, we all need purpose. And sometimes we all need someone to see our potential when we've forgotten it ourselves." He looked at Porter, who nodded in encouragement. "I was lucky," Peter continued. "Someone saw me as a person, not a problem. Not everyone gets that chance. That's why the scholarship program we're announcing today is so important. It will find brilliant minds in unlikely places and give them the support they need to flourish." After the event, as people lined up to have their book signed, Porter approached with a young woman beside him. "Peter, I'd like you to meet my daughter Lisa. The one who benefited from your teaching methods years ago. She's graduating from MIT next month. Lisa shook Peter's hand enthusiastically. Your paper on visual calculus got me through freshman year. Now I'm helping design educational software based on similar principles. As they talked, Peter realized his work had been making a difference even when he was at his lowest point. His ideas had traveled beyond his reach, helping students he would never meet. That night, back in his cottage, Peter sat on his porch watching the sunset. From here, he could see the luxury homes Porter had built, their lights coming on as evening fell. He could also see the edge of the forest where he had lived for 2 years, wild and untouched. Both views were part of his story now. The darkness and the light. The isolation and the connection. The fall and the rise. On his desk inside lay a letter he had received that morning. An invitation to speak at a national education conference. The subject: Innovative Approaches to Teaching Mathematics to Underprivileged Students. Peter Collins, once forgotten in the woods, had found his voice again. And this time the world was listening. All because a man had looked at him and seen not a problem to be removed, but a person deserving of dignity. All because, in that crucial moment, Samuel, Porter had yelled those life-changing words, "Let him go."